Hello and greetings, fellow StarCrafters. This is PGL Milncraft, and welcome back to Game 3 of the Best of 5 between Phoenix and GosuHwangsin. This map is going to be Tal'Darim Altar, one of the biggest maps in the map pool, and I've been saying this every time, but they're cross positions, and so it could say a macro match. Actually, it was Phoenix who prevented the macro match because he delayed Hwangsin's expansion so long that Hwangsin had decided that he was just going to go ahead and do a 4-gate all-in because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to compete economically, and so he decided that his last chance was just to deal as much damage as possible with that surprise attack. And he saw with his observer basically the entire size of Phoenix's army, and so he knew he was safe to do so. Phoenix decided to not only expand, but after expanding to tech, which made his army size a lot smaller than it needed to be, and he just didn't have enough bunker. I mean, he had enough bunkers. He had 2 or 3 bunkers, which is pretty good, but he didn't have enough SCVs to repair those bunkers, and the force fields were able to delay those anyway. Even if he sent all of his SCVs, I was criticizing him for it. It doesn't mean he's going to win just by sending all those SCVs. What I'm criticizing, I mean, he could have won the game. Maybe those SCVs would have won, but the force fields could have prevented from the sentries, could have prevented the SCVs from being able to engage. GosuHwangsin only used as many force fields as he needed, but let's say Phoenix did send another 15 SCVs. It's entirely possible that Hwangsin would have just force fielded them away, preventing them from repairing the bunkers, and the situation would have been exactly the same. But I think it was certainly worth it. I mean, there's no reason not to send your SCVs in a situation like that, as I talked about previously. Meanwhile, we do see gas going down from both players, so their builds look exactly the same so far as in previous games. We'll see if Phoenix goes for that early Reaper for scouting purposes, or for a little bit of scouting purposes, and for and just kind of to see a little bit of harassment, see if they can deal a little bit of damage. But sometimes those Reapers get 2 or 3 kills, which is pretty good for the Reaper, especially if he gets scouting information on top of that. Phoenix is probably going to be super cautious this time. Last time he was cautious, actually. He got 2 barracks before he got the expansion, and he was getting Marauder slow right away, so he would have been effective against those types of forces. And actually, he had so many early game units that he was able to deny his opponent's expansion for so long, which of course led to the situation that we saw in that game. Meanwhile, the Marine's going to go ahead and chase the probe out. The probe's trying to be a little bit nimble, but not going to happen. The Marine says, "No, you're not dealing with me the way you dealt with my friends." And he takes that probe out, teaches him a lesson not to try to scout and sneak their expansions. And actually, wow, we see, yes, a 1-gate fast expansion. The reason that, I wonder if the SCV did in fact see the expansion, and Phoenix did check on it, and the Stalker's being chrono boosted out now to deal with this SCV. So actually we will see at least a 2-base game in this match because Phoenix is getting his own expansion as well. He actually decided not to get a tech lab, so I guess the reactor, so I would say the refinery rather, not the reactor. I guess the refinery was mostly for kind of protection purposes, and also just to make sure that the factory is faster, because normally if you do a gasless fast expand, you build a command center after the first barracks, and then you build 2 refineries right away to try to catch up. But now Phoenix just has the 1 refinery, he's got the 2nd on the way, and he's already building his factory, so his tech is going to be that much faster. And if he decides to get, I don't know, any sort of early siege tanks or something, which siege tanks are not often used too much in Terran versus Protoss, but they are useful to protect against any sort of 6-gate attacks. The kind of attack that Hwangsin did in the previous game easily could have prevented with 1 siege tank with siege mode, would have stopped the entirety of the attack, and just been incredibly successful. We do see a bunker going down for Phoenix, just to make sure he's extra safe with this defense. He doesn't know if his opponent canceled, as the SCV did decide to leave before the Stalker finished. And we see 3 gateways coming out from Hwangsin just to make sure he's safe. He's not going to start teching right away into a robo. He just wants to make sure he's got the units. And that also time, I think they'll finish about the same time that Warp Gate finishes. And they'll be able to transition to Warp Gates to get a bunch of sentries or, what other kind of units he wants to get. Meanwhile, we see the 2nd simulator coming down. So Hwangsin did do a true 1 gateway fast expand where he, got 1 gateway, 1 gas, and 1 cybernetics core before he expanded. Meanwhile, he's got a lot of Marines coming out, 2 reactor factories, and he does in fact getting siege tanks to make sure he's extra defended against those. Very useful early game against any sort of Protoss aggression. They've also got a long range and a fast firing radius, so even if, looks like 2-Toed Sloth is online, so even if I'm going to go ahead and set myself to busy, actually. And so even if they, what was I talking about? Oh, so even if they don't have siege mode, the siege tanks are actually still effective in defending against any sort of Protoss early aggression. Meanwhile, we actually see a forge coming down from Hwangsin, and an engineering base simultaneously from the Terran player. For the Terran player, I think that's mostly for, it's at least partially for detection, but also for weapons level 1. Oh, and actually, Hwangsin's getting weapons level 1. I was going to say he was going to get armor level 1, but he's actually getting weapons. I think the thought process is most likely for Colossus. I think this is a sign that he wants to go Colossus because weapons upgrades is much more effective. Armor upgrade is much better for gateway units, whereas weapons is more effective for Colossus because Colossus do the splash damage, and they also, on top of doing the splash damage, they also do get 2 damage each to each of their thermal lances upgraded each time they get weapons upgrades, so it's quite effective there. And we do see a little bit of a wall off from Phoenix. He wants to make sure that if any zealots engage, they've got limited amounts of space they're able to engage. And actually, we see 3 siege tanks coming out. That's some of the most siege tanks I've seen in a Terran versus Protoss in some time. I think I'm a huge fan of siege tanks. Siege tanks were like the mainstay unit. That's like the only unit that you would use in Brood War. Like that's like almost every matchup would rely heavily on siege tanks. Sometimes you could go bio depending on very specific Protoss builds that they would go. And actually, it looks like we're actually going to see a little bit of aggression from Phoenix. And he's got a medevac actually coming out. How soon is it there? We've already got one popped out. Yep, so what he's going to do with these siege tanks, he's actually going to park down here and siege up and use the medevacs to spot the high ground and make sure that the zealots can't engage the units without going around and taking all the damage from the siege tanks, and the sentries and stalkers can't really engage because the siege tanks are going to deal so much damage. So actually, if he gets in position, which probably Hwangsin's going to try to stop with his forces up there, but if he gets in position, then he's going to be able to successfully, and actually he's just going to do a hard push. He's going to slowly move forward, and we do see charge now. Charge is, of course, the Protoss answer. Oh, nice little drop here. I really like this. He's just dropping 3 Marines in the middle, and actually the stim is just starting, so stim's a little late. That's the price you pay for getting all the siege tanks early, and he should pick those guys up and run away, which he's going to do. But nice little maneuver there. But what was I talking about? But the charge is the answer to siege tanks because siege tanks only deal 35 damage per shot to zealots. And so he's got a bunker set up. He's got the siege tank set up now. Looks like Hwangsin's gearing up to just go, though. He knows that his gas is going to be start getting hit, and that oh no, but he's changed his mind. He's realized that the siege tanks are actually set up. Looks like he's going to just back off here. He realizes he can't take the siege line, and Phoenix is dropping Marines in the back to be able to stop any sort of mining. So actually, he's going to be economically ahead for at least the short term. Meanwhile, the stalkers are actually going to be able to take out the Marines, and sorry for those technical difficulties. Stalkers are going to be able to deal with the Marines, but the medevac's going to pull those Marines out, and Phoenix should actually move one of the siege tanks farther up, and so he should move one of his siege tanks up and try to deal with them that way. Meanwhile, the Protoss army is gearing up to just go around and engage, which sounds actually, and that Archon can actually take a lot of siege tank hits, and so Hwangsin's just going to move in. He's going to deal a lot of damage here, and I think most likely he's actually just going to take out this little army here, as even without charge, he's just dealing too much damage. He was able to engage in the flank of the siege tanks, and the Archon was able to just clean up this little force here. And so it looks like Hwangsin was successful in clearing out Phoenix's little army. That Marine's going to get sliced apart. We can watch this in, oh, that SCV, my mistake. Alright, just did a restart, so hopefully that'll solve any of our technical problems, and it appears to be working. Sorry about all those technical difficulties. Don't know why my computer decided to slow down, and why it's slowing down again. Rah! Oh, but it went fast again. Excellent. Alright. So, we do see that GosuHwangsin was able to go around, hit the flank of the siege tanks. So the siege tanks weren't able to get that many shots off before they were actually engaged by all of these forces. And, I mean, like, that's a lot of gateway units. And siege tanks just don't deal enough damage, especially the Protoss units, just because Protoss units have so much health, and especially Zealots and Archons don't only have a lot of health. But they only take 35 damage from the siege tank shots. GosuHwangsin, I don't know why I was mixing all those words up. Hwangsin has a lot of forces, and he realizes his advantage right now, and so Phoenix is actually building bunkers to defend against this, but I don't think he has that enough forces, not even close to enough forces right now. He definitely needs more siege tanks, and siege tanks are coming, and the medevacs are going to help a lot as well. But he's going to have to pull his SCVs to be able to deal with this attack that's coming. Hwangsin has a very large army that can come at any moment. I believe it's much better upgraded as well. It's 2-1 upgraded versus 0-0 for Phoenix. He does have one siege tank in the bushes there. I didn't even see that one. And then another siege tank behind. Actually, that might be enough. Given the tight confines that Hwangsin would have to attack in, that's probably enough. But Hwangsin definitely wants to try to push out right now. Oh, nice little drop here from Phoenix, able to deal a little bit of damage. Probably is going to take out 1 or 2 stalkers as well. 1 stalker, 2 stalkers. Feedback's going to take out the medevac. Nice job from Hwangsin. Able to take out the medevac, and the charge lots are going to slice apart that marauder. Meanwhile, the rest of the army backed off as well, so Phoenix is able to break out from the little soft contain that was going on, keeping him bottled up, and he's getting a 4th command center as well in order gearing up to try to get some sort of advantage, because he knew that Hwangsin took an expansion just a little bit faster than he did. Meanwhile, we see a couple of Archons coming in. I don't believe he's I was going to say Worship Storm, Research Storm yet. I don't think he has any, he doesn't have any Templar out, and I think he'd be saving his Templar feed Research Storm. So he just wants to get Archons to help feed his army. He also probably had extra gas as a result of all the charge lots. Look at all the charge lots he has. What is that, 13 charge lots? That's pretty good numbers. And they're going to be 3-2 upgraded very soon. And so this gateway heavy force is going to be incredibly effective. I'm still not certain why he did armor first, or why he did weapons first. I don't have much explanation for that, other than his thoughts were to get, he's going to get 2 forges and double upgrade both. And that Marauder's lucky to be alive. Charge lots are not going to be able to catch him. And meanwhile, he got rid of the bunkers, actually. So, is he going to be vulnerable to a counterattack? It's certainly possible, although 3 ghosts with EMPs are going to be incredibly effective against this type of army, especially since a lot of the brunt-picking power is in the Archons here. But it looks like he's just going to go ahead and go around that force. Phoenix should know about this. He needs to reposition his armies real quickly. He needs to move that siege tank over on the front entrance. Unfortunately, he doesn't really have much defense over there, but we're going to see a lot of EMPs going down. Able to take out 1 Archon right away. Multiple EMPs are able to take out the other Archon right away. And the Force Fields are able to trap a number of units to allow the Zealots to deal a lot of damage. He's going to have to withdraw with the command center because he loses a lot of SCVs in the transferring process. Able to take out those forces. But look at how hurt all of the frontline troops are. Hwangsin able to reposition his troops so that the fresh Zealots are able to move forward and take the top. Meanwhile, the siege tank is able to take a lot of free fire. And a bunch of the SCVs are coming out to try to take as much damage as possible. However, this doesn't look very good for Phoenix at all. Looks like he's taking a lot of damage from Hwangsin. And so it appears that his damage is being dealt. And it looks like, I wonder if Phoenix is able to, no, it looks like Phoenix is not going to be able to hold this up. That new round of Zealots coming in from the freshly placed Proxy Pound is just dealing too much damage. I don't think Phoenix is able to be able to recover from this. He's down by supply by 35 right now, and it's only getting worse. Meanwhile, GosuHwangsin has 3 bases right now, and actually, no, my mistake. Oh wow, sorry to miss that drop. He was able to take out 2 of Hwangsin's bases during that whole attack, using a drop from Marines and Marauders. It looks like Hwangsin didn't notice it. My mistake. I didn't even notice it as well. And so actually, Phoenix is going to be ahead in this particular match right now in terms of his economy. Right as soon as he gets these SCVs working again, and. Meanwhile, it looks like Hwangsin's going to go in for one final attack because both of his bases were taken out. It looks like this is going to be the end of his attack, or this is going to be the last attack, the last hurrah. Unfortunately, the Zealots are stuck on the inside, bouncing around. Killing his stalker there was able to free them, but not before a lot of damage had been dealt from the Terran unit. It looks like this is probably going to be too many Marauders, I would say. However, the Archons are incredibly effective against Marauders. Marauders just don't deal enough damage against them. However, he's able to take both of the Archons out. Meanwhile, he doesn't have enough energy for EMP on his Ghosts. But it looks like he is entirely out of SCVs. Meanwhile, he does have 2 medevacs and Marauders and Marines. He just needs to be able to hold out against this attack, as his opponent is almost completely drained of resources and is long-distance mining for any of the income that he's going to currently have. And so he just needs to wait for all these barracks and bunkers, or all these barracks to reproduce new units. It looks like the Marauders and the Marines are going to be dealing as much damage as possible. The medevacs are being quite effective here in these late-game situations, as they can just keep healing and healing, but both of those are going to be taken out by the Stalkers. Meanwhile, the new units being produced are doing what they can right now, but we see another Archon coming in, and it looks like Phoenix is actually just going to have to GG out of this game. He really made it close there. That was a really nice drop on his part. I believe it was that, I'm not sure which force it was, but it was an earlier force that he had sent during the attack and was able to take those out. My apologies for missing that, but there was a different action scene going on, which I thought was just as important to be able to watch. And I mean, I didn't even see it. I'm not trying to make excuses. Anyway, and looks like Hwangsin was able to barely win this game, and so Hwangsin is currently up 3-0, and we move on to game number 4. This is PGM.